Hello everyone, hope you all are doing well and welcome back to the Baking Analyst channel. On this channel we cover everything from cryptocurrencies to economics to personal finance with a focus on yield farming and decentralized finance or DeFi investing. So if all that sounds interesting to you, do consider leaving a like and subscribing to this channel. If you're completely new to the world of DeFi and you're wondering how people can generate passive income from staking of their cryptocurrencies, well, I actually have an online course that you can access using the Skillshare link down in the description below. You can cancel it at any time and it'll come at no cost to you whatsoever. So with that shilling out of the way, let's jump right into the video. Today we're going to be talking about some urgent news for DAI holders. So if you're a holder of a DAI stablecoin and you're yield farming in any of these many stablecoin pools that are paying out pretty good APRs at the moment, then you might want to stick around to the end to fully understand what on earth has just been announced from MakerDAO, the team behind the DAI stablecoin, and how this could affect your investments in the coming years. So first, let's understand what the three types of stablecoins are. These include centralized and collateralized, so your USDC and USDT, your decentralized and collateralized, which are like your DAI stablecoins, and then finally you have the algorithmic or under-collateralized stablecoins like your Tomb Forks or your UST. We also see that the MakerDAO team has proposed changes to DAI. This has not yet been voted on and has not yet passed, so none of this is confirmed. However, this is something that you should know as soon as possible if you're already invested in DAI and intend to continue yield farming with it for the longer term. So let's have a look at the main proposed changes. So currently DAI is of course over-collateralized through their CDP or collateralized debt position arrangements, and then we also have the issue of it being one-for-one redeemable for whatever collateral that is backing it. However, in the future, the proposed changes are that DAI should be free floated and function as this thing called an unbiased world currency, so it will not hold that one-to-one US dollar value. It will also seek to become more cryptocurrency backed rather than backed by real world assets. When we go over to this page, we see that an endgame has pretty much been written up. This is a pretty long document, and it's a pretty good read if you want to fully understand what MakerDAO is doing with its demand side and supply side mechanisms to try to accrue value to the DAI stablecoin, as well as create an unbiased world currency. However, perhaps the most important piece of news that you should take away from this entire video today is that it is possible that DAI will go into free float, and yes, that does mean a depegging from the US dollar. Now, when we talk about this, we have to ask the question, why on earth would DAI want to look towards unpegging from the US dollar? After all, it is doing so well, especially with what happened with UST, what happened with, the Harmony One bridge and all these kinds of stable coins basically losing their peg, Oasis Network and Evo DeFi as well. So why would DAI want to break something that's functioning very well? Well, the first issue is the risk of regulatory seizure. And we have already seen this in the form of Tornado Cash being sanctioned. And I can go on and on about the various problems with the Tornado sanctioning and how it has brought about unintended consequences like dust attacks. However, in this case, the issue is with the idea of backing a cryptocurrency with real-world assets. And these real-world assets, of course, exist within the jurisdiction of specific governments. As a result, they are directly seizable. So for example, things like USDC, their treasury is entirely seizable because it is located in a particular jurisdiction, and therefore it could technically lose backing if its assets were to be suddenly seized, frozen, or otherwise made unavailable. The other issue is the ideological need for an unbiased world currency rather than one that is subject to the whims of any particular regulator. Now, of course, the Tornado Cash incident has sort of accelerated this, but the idea of a need for an unbiased world currency has been existent since the start of the whole cryptocurrency movement, since this was the foundation upon which cryptocurrency and decentralized cryptocurrency, to be specific, was built. Well, looking at the endgame plan, the idea is to reduce the percentage of backing that is in the form of real-world assets, or RWA collateral. So of course this is based on the assumption that a regulatory crackdown on the RWA collateral is likely, and basically this plan looks to defend against some of that. Well, looking into this, we see that even MakerDAO, the founder of MakerDAO, acknowledges that it is possible that up to 50% of protocol users may exit their DAI positions in a short period of time after free floating comes into effect. And now, while they don't directly say it here, this could mean DAI losing peg and going way below $1, meaning that anyone who is holding on to DAI and farming them in a liquidity pool could be subject to some impermanent or even permanent losses if one were to try to realize it. Now, of course, I will have to preface this by saying that the endgame plan does seem to take into account many issues with trying to balance demand and supply and keeping prices of DAI stable, and that will come in the form of this thing called a target rate. Well, in this case, it does seem that DAI is moving in the direction of some sort of algorithmic mechanism that allows for some sort of target rate to be achieved. by aggregating some CPI data. And now we've seen this happen a number of times in the crypto space, especially in UST as well as some Tomb forks. And one issue with this algorithmic stabilization is that ultimately the free float price of an asset depends on demand and supply. And even though you can control supply to such an extent, such as by burning or issuing new tokens, you really need that kind of demand for a particular token, in this case DAI, for prices to remain relatively stable. And in this case, of course, this is the crux of their idea of this MakerDAO as well as yield farming opportunities. So it's heartening to see that MakerDAO, one of the biggest DeFi projects on Ethereum, has kind of thought through the economics of this whole thing. Well, to get a better idea or basic idea of this whole MetaDAO situation, you can think of MetaDAOs as sub-DAOs or sub-organizations that lie within the overall Maker umbrella. So Maker kind of incubates and provides infrastructure for these MetaDAOs, and at the same time, these MetaDAOs reward governance tokens in the form of yield farming rewards, as well as produce some sort of product or value that could generate protocol income, and of course in such a way contributes back to the Maker core. Now, this whole idea of value generation within the decentralized autonomous organization does seem promising, because providing value is the best way of building demand for a particular product. Another thing that we see is yield farming, and that is probably something that we're all interested in. That is something that we can also look forward to in the initial phases, because MakerDAO has published this kind of farming distribution schematic wherein MetaDAO tokens are distributed across farms for DAI, EtherDAI, and Maker. So this creates some demand side pressure for DAI, supposedly helping to stabilize its price, preventing it from falling far below its peg. Now, the final thing that we need to look at is the whole setup of the different stances. And MakerDAO has separated this into the Pigeon Stance, the Eagle Stance, as well as the Phoenix Stance in that particular order, and in increasing order of risk of regulatory crackdown. So this, in a sense, gives us an impression of how much time we may have before large changes come into effect. So first of all, the Pigeon Stance. The Pigeon Stance is basically where we are at now, or in the so-called pre-game phase, where DAI is still 1-to-1 pegged to the US dollar, and the idea of the Pigeon Stance is to scavenge. So the argument that is being put forth is that most of DeFi's benefits have already been extracted, and that, as regulators start coming in, we're going to see these profits from DeFi become thinner and thinner pickings. So in this case, the idea of the Pigeon Stance is that the goal of Maker will be to generate as much income from real-world assets, which is exactly what they're trying to get rid of in the future stages, because they are subject to potential seizure, and accumulate as much virtual assets, in this case Ethereum, as possible in a protocol-owned vault. So that is some way to provide, a huge treasury fund to help back up the DAI target rate. Now, of course, we do see that this Pigeon Stance, which is similar to status quo, will last about 2.5 years. So definitely we do still have some time to go before we see any significant changes, and that is even assuming this entire proposal passes. So in this final bit, I just wanted to chip in on my personal opinions about the viability of such an approach. This will very much depend on crypto adoption going through the roof, because the only way that there is going to be demand for this one world unbiased currency is for there to be acceptance of that currency in exchange for value, and that of course can be created by the MetaDAOs themselves or other actors. Whether or not it is realistic that crypto gets to that sort of adoption is anyone's guess, especially in the volatile world that we live in. One thing that would have to mention is that trying to maintain a target rate could be potentially challenging for DAI. To understand why this is the case, one needs to look no further than what is going on in Europe and the UK. If we go over to look at this GBP, or Great British Pound to US dollar chart over here, we have seen the British Pound, which is a free float sovereign national currency, fall into basically oblivion over the past month as well as the past year. Now, it is important to realize that this is not a cryptocurrency, it is not a shitcoin. It is also not some sort of emerging market currency, even though it does seem to be behaving like one now. So for a cryptocurrency that looks to be a stable store of value or world currency to somehow maintain some sort of purchasing power and target rate does appear to be a relatively large challenge. And while, of course, we all want crypto to succeed in the long run, you might be thinking at this point it could be a better move to simply watch this financial experiment unfold on the sidelines rather than be overexposed to the upcoming changes. So all in all, I hope this video has been informative and useful. If you liked it, do leave a like down below and consider subscribing to this channel. We come up with this content on a regular, bi-weekly, or weekly basis depending on demand in the market. So do check out more of our videos if you're interested in DeFi investing. Do also feel free to check out our Discord channel, which is linked in the description down below. There's a community of DeFi natives in there who are always ready and willing to answer any questions or share various tips and tricks that they have found useful. With that being said, thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.